There's this one setting on Canon cameras that I've ignored for years. I thought it was just a gimmick or worse, something that would ruin my image quality. But on my latest road trip, I discovered that I was completely wrong. This setting literally changes everything about how I shoot and will make your life so much easier as well. Blown highlights are one of the most frustrating issues in photography, but with this one tweak, we can basically make them disappear. So let me show you what this tweak is, how to set it up, and why you'll likely never want to turn it off again. I'm Wegener, and for over 20 years, I've been a professional photographer capturing unique bird photos and videos and teaching all of you to create your own masterpieces. On my recent road trip, I was confronted with an almost impossible shooting situation. A few western yellow robins hopping right in front of me, but these birds have a dark back and head, and a super bright throat and bright yellow belly. And to top it off, these birds were posing for me in strong mottled light, casting shadows and bright areas all over my subject. Attempting to get good detail in the dark shadowy areas resulted in me completely blowing out all detail on the bright yellow feathers of the bird, and when I exposed for the yellow belly, I ended up with extremely underexposed raw files. Both of which are not ideal because they would require a lot of work in the editing process to get a somewhat acceptable but still not perfect result. I'd never photographed these birds before, so was super keen to get some images. And that's when I remembered a setting that a friend of mine told me a few years ago. So I quickly went into my R5 Mark II's menu, made a couple changes, and started shooting again. And what happened next basically blew my mind. Because with the highlight tone priority turned on, I was now suddenly able to expose for the dark areas of the image without blowing any of my highlights anymore. And if we look at the exposures here side by side, without the highlight tone priority turned on with the same exposure settings, we're blowing out the belly. With the highlight tone priority turned on, we now have all the beautiful detail in the bird's belly. So a pretty amazing transformation that allowed me to get away with a few keepers on that day. I had previously played around with this feature but never found it to be as dramatic as it was in this extreme shooting scenario. So to turn this feature on, and I think it's available in most Canon cameras, you go to the third red photo menu on the newer cameras and to the second red photo menu on the older cameras. And at the very bottom, you select highlight tone priority. And usually I like to select here the D2 plus mode. And with that turned on, now you can expose much brighter without actually blowing any of your highlights. And if you're wondering about what the highlight tone priority actually does, it basically is a bit of in-camera processing, because when you enable this feature, the camera takes images that are slightly underexposed and then uses a tone curve to adjust the overall brightness while preserving all the details in the highlights. Setting up our camera in the best way possible and enabling helpful settings like the highlight tone priority is step 1 when it comes to photography. Taking the raw photos is step 2. But the third and almost most important step is actually to learn image editing. Because without proper editing techniques and a good workflow to follow, we won't be able to turn our raw files that we take in the field into beautiful masterpieces afterwards that we can share with the world. And I would love to help you on your editing journey with my Lightroom and Next Generation Photoshop masterclasses. In my classes, I teach you step by step and then easy to follow chapters all the important tools in Lightroom and Photoshop that you need to transform your raw files into masterpieces. And of course, I'm also sharing with you my easy to follow workflow that you can apply to all your raw files and get great results every single time. But of course you won't just be watching, because I'm also providing you with my own raw files so you can edit right alongside me. And if you're not sure if my classes are worth it or the right fit for you, check out some of the amazing reviews that I receive on a daily basis from many happy students who I've helped to transform their editing lives. And some of them are so happy that they even make YouTube videos about my classes. So if you want to turn editing from a frustrating chore where you don't really know where to begin or what sliders to pull into a rewarding experience where you have an easy to follow workflow that guarantees you great results, make sure to check out my classes down below. I know they will help you a lot. When it comes to brands other than Canon, it seems like the implementation is a little bit different, and for many brands this feature will only work in combination with JPEG files. Whereas for Canon and Fujifilm, it seems like the data can also be directly baked into the RAW files, and then programs like Photoshop and Lightroom can read it out directly and show you the file with the better maintained highlights. Most of these features and a lot of the HDR features are usually only available when shooting JPEG, but the highlight tone priority in particular is also available for the RAW files on Canon. On some camera models, using this feature may also slow down the camera or increase the time it takes to clear the buffer, but when I was using it with the R1 or R5 Mark II, I didn't really notice much of a difference at all. The biggest advantage of using the highlight tone priority in the field is definitely our ability to now expose much brighter without blowing out any of the highlights or losing detail in the very bright areas. And as you know, exposing to the right and shooting a bit brighter allows us to get the best overall image quality. And having the highlight tone priority enabled basically supercharges our ability to expose to the right, because now we're less likely to clip some of these highlights. And it also acts as an extra layer of protection in case you're accidentally exposing too bright. Of course, there's limits to this, and if we completely overexpose our images, we will still blow some highlights. Being able to use this feature in the field and get more balanced raw files right out of camera is a fantastic advantage, and also makes editing our files so much easier, because instead of difficult masking and lifting dark areas and darkening down bright areas, the camera does a lot of the heavy lifting for us already and saves us a bunch of time. Where I see the highlight tone priority working the best is if you're confronted with a shooting situation that has drastic dynamic range differences throughout the whole scene. For instance, you're confronted with a darker bird and a bright background. Without the highlight tone priority, you would likely blow out the background, but now you can actually expose for the bird and still maintain a bit of detail in the bright background as well. Or you're confronted with a bird that has one really bright feature and everything else in your scene is quite dark. So with the highlight tone priority activated, you're now less likely to lose all the detail in that very bright area. And of course, it's also fantastic for mottled light situations where we have some dark areas and some bright areas, because it will just give us a much more balanced raw file. One thing to be aware of when using the highlight tone priority is that it can add a little bit of extra noise to the dark and shadowy areas of your images. So if you're shooting in a deep dark rainforest or very evenly lit environment where you're not at the risk of blowing out any highlights, I would probably consider turning off this feature to get a little bit of boost in image quality. But in other situations, if you're confronted with mottled light or strong dynamic range differences or very bright areas on your subject, I would definitely turn on this feature to get much more balanced and better exposed overall raw files. On my road trip, I shot more than 40,000 images with this feature activated, and in most situations, it was truly amazing. There was definitely certain scenarios where I would have blown certain areas on my subject or the perch, but with this feature enabled, I was now able to easily maintain detail in those areas. So while I won't have this feature on every single time, in probably 90% of the cases, I think it will be very helpful going forward. And now it's time for you guys to take out your cameras and turn it on yourself. Or have you done so already? What are your experiences with the highlight tone priority? Have you used it already? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are you going to use it now? Let me know in the comments. Also give me a thumbs up for the video. Check out my channel membership and my masterclasses. And of course, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in another video very soon. Bye.